Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week in MHA621, where the topic, as you see, is the framework of the healthcare delivery system. It's a rather large concept to get our heads around, but let's get started. So at the end of this module, hopefully all of you will be able to describe the overall framework of our healthcare delivery system. And I want to leave you with a few important concepts, but think about the notion of connectivity, relationships, networking. It will all come into play here. But the first concept that I want to share with you is really one that it's a term that's been used widely to really summarize and describe our healthcare system, and that's the notion of a triad. Um, Healthcare is, first of all, a lot of these images come from Jones and Bartlett publishers, which are just too good for me to recreate. So I want to thank them for that. Um, you think about a triad, or sometimes referred to, and this is my attempt to draw, a three-legged stool, where the idea of cost, quality, and access, cost control, quality, and access really are the three legs of this stool. And so all three of them are connected to each other. Certainly, as you have professionally and personally experienced, sometimes there are issues with any one of them. But the US healthcare delivery system is, as this image says, it's a massive part of our economy. It's a massive part in terms of employment, just in terms of the overall employment of the country. Certainly it differs by state. But the triad part is key to understanding this framework of the healthcare delivery system. Now, along with that, and I believe you should be able to see this image again, which I think defines the complexity of the healthcare delivery system pretty well. Now, there are other sections that have since grown and developed over time, but these six, from education and research to the government, really encompass the complexity. The idea is for all of them to function most of the time with each other. They have to. Certainly, providers are connected to the government, connected to education, connected to suppliers. And insurers and payers are connected, but also very different. But you can see, if you look at the provider column, how much that has developed, certainly over the last 20 years. But even if you go back historically 50 some years ago to, over 55, 56 years ago, or let's say 1965, when Medicare and Medicaid was developed, this list of providers wouldn't have been near as long. There's a lot more specialties, a lot more individuals, organizations connected to the provider list. So it adds to the complexity. Now, at its basis, and I'll go back to this, it really is somewhat simple if you think about cost, quality, and access. And those three pieces or three legs of the stool have to function together, but the complexity is there as well. Now, this is, I want to move to this slide here again, taken from Jones and Bartlett, because it really encompasses still probably, the most basic healthcare delivery function. I'd like you to think about one in particular, probably the most used service in our healthcare system, which is acquisition of prescriptions. Acquisition's a fancy word. How about just getting your prescription filled? It is the most common interaction within our healthcare system. For the most part, of course, it happens on an outpatient basis with pharmacies, but there's a variety of things happening. from either a request, a refill, an initial prescription, which comes from the providers. But then there's certainly payment that occurs, insurance, there's financing. And in here is this notion of access. Access meaning two things in terms of how healthcare is delivered. First and foremost, connected to insurance. And we'll talk a lot about that in our course. Certainly with the Affordable Care Act, which might seem many moons ago, but it is still playing out today. Access was increased, but the insurance, health insurance industry, which is for the most part based on one major concept, which is risk, is in some ways the most complicated part of our healthcare system. There's a lot of scholars who also define access as being able to physically, geographically receive the healthcare services. So if you're not close to a pharmacy or it's 150 miles away, but certainly providers, that's a different access issue, regardless if you have insurance. The idea, though, of how healthcare is delivered, for the most part, in terms of this slide, is behind the scenes. As recipients, as consumers, excuse me, we tend to see providers. We tend to visibly see them, but we don't have a lot of interaction, or hopefully little interaction, with the other parts of the healthcare system. So they have to function. They function electronically for the most part, but it does differ. And I'm reminded of my dentist's office, which is an excellent office, very efficient, provides very good care, but runs completely different than my physician's office. And it's almost like a different world. You're comparing, like I like to say, apples and dump trucks. It's not even close. And yet it is all part of our healthcare delivery system. So I want to move to another part of the framework, which I think all of you will certainly understand and be connected to, and that's external forces that absolutely, I'm not going to say only affect the healthcare delivery system, but impact. And so we start just by going around right at 12 o'clock here, the social values, culture. We have one healthcare system as we think about, but the reality is we have thousands of healthcare systems in this country. And so one of the things I'd like to leave you with is that healthcare is always local. And by that, I mean, certainly we can compare infection rates or hospitalizations across the country. But I'm sitting here in Evansville, Indiana, and most of you are certainly within the proximity to where I am, and the care that is delivered and all of the background stuff. There's a lot of similarities, but there's lots of differences. And so these values really do matter in terms of urban, rural, in terms of different parts of the country, certainly in terms of, as we see racial and ethnic minorities, accessing our healthcare system in different parts of the country and their experience as well. Global influences are key. I think all of you certainly have epidemics in your mind, as that has been a reality, not just fairly recently, but going back, throughout the history of our modern healthcare system. The population characteristics are important as well. Physical environment, the pollutants in our air, the information systems, everything connects. We do tend to focus sort of nationally much more so nationally on the political climate. And it does matter, in terms of the presidential administration, the Congress, but the states and the local entities matter more. All healthcare is local. And so health insurance is overseen by a state insurance commissioner. Even though Medicare, which I like to describe as the largest insurance program in the world, is a national program, it really has diverse interest across states and, of course, regions. Certainly Medicaid, which we'll talk about both of those a little bit in another section of the course, is state controlled. But these external forces matter. Some are controlled, some certainly are imposed upon us. And so that really changes how our system operates. One last image slide before I go into a conclusion. In the last 20 years, this notion of a continuum of healthcare services or continuum of healthcare services has really been at the forefront. And you can see that this continuum perhaps logically goes from more basic services to more intense, from more preventive services to end-of-life care. Now, we know that life is not on a continuum. We sometimes skip to different things and maybe even go back. So it's not all in a straight line, whether it be this way or this way. But it's a way to define the delivery settings and to really categorize them. And I think there's a reason, actually, a good reason why this is in this column. Even though the continuum, I think about a relay race, perhaps, and a baton, which is passed from different runners. This is my feeble attempt at drawing a baton. It's a pretty bad baton, I think. But necessarily, the preventative services over here might not connect with acute care. And this is where we have breakdowns. So I think this image, whether it was intended to be longitudinal or not, really tells a great story. This is something that really needs a lot of attention. And perhaps it's better to have the services connected this way, where there is overlap in between the spaces. Now that's starting to occur. Certainly it tends to occur in maybe more long-term care settings. Some of you have experience professionally, perhaps personally, with family members with long-term care, and you understand, although not perfect, that the idea of a community of long-term care is becoming a little bit more relevant, perhaps an independent living establishment with an assisted living place next door, and then maybe a traditional nursing home connected to it, along with rehab care. That's much more of a community home, but we've got a little ways to go in terms of the other services. Okay, so my overall thoughts. And this, by the way, also is the length of probably how most of these lectures are going to take for the most part. I'd like you to think about the frame of a home. So again, my attempt to draw a home, the frame of a home. And because the idea of the framework of our healthcare system, I like to think about the frame of a home. And so this is the, let's say, exterior structure, not just the foundation, but perhaps the walls, the roof. And these are more generalist type notions that we need these for the home to stand up. But inside the home are special type of, I don't even know what this is. It looks like a pizza, actually, but hopefully you can get my idea that specialist type, whether it be a kitchen area or a finished basement or some sort of flooring or how an open concept. So the analogy I'm making is our healthcare delivery system is both one of generalists and specialists. And I'm not just talking about individuals, of course, but there's some general ideas. Those generalist concepts mainly think about the idea of the triad: cost, quality, access. It's the general framework of the healthcare system. Everything else, from the complexities to the continuum, all those other slides are the specialty features. Understanding this, and by the way, this is a very simple way, CQA, of explaining some very in-depth concepts that alter and fluctuate over time. So think about generalists and specialists. It's also what I think this MHA degree is about. So I'll just sort of leave you at this, that the purpose of the Master of Health Administration degree, it's a leadership degree, but it is intending to make generalists and specialists out of each of you. And certainly that you will go down different paths, I hope, in healthcare, and some of you are well on that way. But the degree exposes you to the general notions of healthcare, but also some very special areas. Within this course, it's much more general, but we'll dive into some specialist stuff. Okay, that's all for me. As I like to say, let me know if you have any questions. You can reach out to me at any time. If there's something that you want to talk about further, I'd love to. In the meantime, it's been good. Okay. Take care, folks. Bye.